It is my pleasure today to introduce Doug Voss. He is the third generation on his family farm with his wife Beth and their 5 boys, located near Painesville, Minnesota. The farm was historically a dairy, eventually converted to certified organic, and now Doug has converted all acres to a perennial system and implemented adaptive grazing practices in an effort to accelerate the farm's ecological advancement. Currently, the farm includes a grass-fed beef herd, a small dairy, and a custom grazing enterprise.
Thanks for joining me. I'm eager to share a little bit about my story. If you're thinking you're going to get a recipe today to go home to plug and play like a template to do all your leases, you'll probably be a little disappointed. I want to show you a little insight on how I approach what I've done, which is maybe a little bit differently than other situations you may have heard, and hopefully it provides some value for you. I want to provide a little context. I'm not real good about talking about myself, but I think it's important in this situation to understand a little bit where I'm coming from and why I made some of the decisions that I have made. My journey along the soil health journey started years ago with a class from Elaine Ingham, and learned that what I had learned and been taught before just wasn't real accurate, and there was more to learn. And that led into a real eagerness to learn more about what my management was doing on our own farm, how it was affecting my profitability, what opportunities I may or may not have been creating with the decisions that I made, and a really good hard look at reevaluating our goals as individuals on the farm with stakeholders and collectively as a farm team. And so what that made for us was coming from, actually 25 years ago I was milking 300 cows twice a day with 1 or 2 high school help, burning my wick at more than one end, hardly ever, met my wife in passing as we passed through the front door oftentimes, thinking that, well, I'm young, I can work now. Someday when maybe things are different, maybe I'll have gained a little equity in the operation, a little better than today at the time, and I can rest a little bit more. Not realizing I was spinning my wheels in a situation that just really wasn't it wasn't sustainable. I learned how to address the resource better at the time, and as a result, I'll share a little more at the end, some of the opportunity it's created for me, which has been real rewarding. We have taken all of our land, tillable, non-tillable, and we are in a whole perennial system now, and grazing everything for the primary reason that I want to restore the resource as quickly as possible, and that was the best way I knew how to do it. And I needed more cattle. And to get more cattle, I didn't want to buy more cattle, but I wanted my farm to improve. And so that's where the start of the rest of my story is going to begin here. I'm going to give you just a few, it's cold outside, right? Everybody wants to look at a few cow pictures, maybe a little bit of green grass. So I'm going to offer a few of those for you right now. Scale as far as the home operation in central Minnesota is about 500 acres owned, and about again as much now leased within a 10-mile radius, and other custom grazing projects on satellite situations further from home. This is just a look. A lot of people don't think from the dairy industry that you can graze cattle in woodland lots and be profitable. Now, our whole farm is not this, but this is just a look at one of the custom groups of heifers that we run. We like to refer to it as summer camp for cows. They come in May when the grass is ready, and at the end of the season they go back home to their respectable dairy, and we don't have to worry about overwintering them. They only get grass, free choice salt, and all the water they want to drink on the farm, and each year I can tell you the animals are returning better and better through epigenetic expression, just with the way we're developing our resource. We do multiple groups for multiple dairies at the home farm. We even have some that do cow-calf pairs, so they're raising their replacement heifers on nurse cows or their dams just because they last so much longer in the dairy herd. Something beef guys have known for years, but the dairy industry is just finally catching on in a few of those situations, in particular with some of the organic operations that require a certain percentage of grazing anyway. Yes, there's a high legume content in there. We've also learned how to navigate some of those barriers. All the grazing land now on the farm is all converted hayfields. Just another look at one of those Holstein groups. It's kind of like feeding a greyhound, right? You can feed them and they still look like they could eat some more. Just some of the response on the resource. Birds follow the group of cattle everywhere we go. Now, this might not sound much like the title of my conversation, but this is the foundation as to how and why we've created the opportunity on our farm for lease opportunities. We feel like we do a pretty good job, and we didn't go to look at practicing our trade on somebody else's farm with a lease situation first. We wanted to be able to prove our land management and our livestock management on our own operation. So when we talked with others about the possibility of leasing land or custom grazing their livestock, they could come and see what we were doing. If they had questions, they can come and look at our livestock. I want to be able to be as transparent as possible, and I want to demonstrate what we're doing. This led into some public lands applications. This is just a look at a 30,000 acre refuge just east of us in Sherburne County, a stone's throw from a metropolitan area there. But funny enough, 5 miles away, you're in almost the heart of Minneapolis, and there's no cell coverage here. And so this is a bit of our context, but we are here for a particular reason. It's not just for cheap grass. Just another look at that operation. We have specific reasons why we approach our management for particular goals. I almost felt like I couldn't have put enough pictures in. It's kind of snow and cold. I'm looking forward to the spring already. All right, so when we started out, any lease opportunity we would consider or wanted to pursue, discovery. I mean, it's almost like a court case, right? You want to learn whatever you don't know. And who holds the land in these situations? Is it private or public? If it's public, depending on who holds it, it's going to have different rules and regulations that are going to govern that. You need to know those going in. The federal land that we run, it's on a bid system. We have to put in a bid. But some of the state-owned land, it's not the same requirement. So having the conversations with who's holding that land has been critical. And then be aware that legislation or whatever might change that the next year. So you do kind of have to keep up on that, but communication with that landholder, land manager, for us has been critical. This is probably one of the biggest things I feel in conversations that I've had with other producers that they miss. The fact that we need to have resource goals on these public lands if we're going to be there. Why are you there? Is it just for cheap grass for your operation? Or are you going to be able to provide a service? And we talked a little about ecological services in another session yesterday with sheep. We're actually providing a service. Now, what's interesting is on federal land, they can bring in goats, and they have a situation where they can pay the goat guys to graze buckthorn, whatever they're targeting. Well, we have to pay for the privilege of grazing our cattle there. That's just the way the regulation is set up. But it's critical to know that, right, and navigate within that. All right, having these conversations between the land managers and grazing party is just critical. They should be ongoing throughout the grazing period, I feel, in order to do a good job. Okay, we communicate every winter, early spring, on every piece of ground that we run. We have at least one conversation during the grazing season to see how those that control and manage that land feel that we're doing with the livestock, because I'm coming in with the livestock. I'm managing the livestock on their resource. And after each grazing season, we have another meeting, and we provide another opportunity to see what they saw. Did they like what they saw? What ways can we improve things? Now again, I'm looking from a resource perspective. I understand that if I degrade the resource, nobody wins. It provides a black eye for the public to be looking at some of these situations. They're going to look at this, they're going to say, well, look, they're just overgrazing anyway. It's going to add to the degradation of the resource. We should just eliminate it altogether. We don't want to provide any ammunition for those conversations to be continuing. And again, no one benefits. So what happens if I degrade the resource? What's going to happen to the bricks levels of my forage? They're going to go down. That's right. That's one of my most valuable tools. Most underutilized tools, I will say we don't use it enough, but the refractometer is one of my favorite tools. It's a real-time evaluation on site. We don't have to wait for a sample to be sent in, to dry out on the dash of the pickup before it gets in. So I know if I improve the resource, I'm going to benefit in time. I don't know on public land if I'm going to be there in 3 years or if I'm going to be there beyond 5 years. Heck, like I said, legislation could change and I might not be there next year. So that realization has to be a part of the conversation. Okay, the land resource, again, will suffer, and so will the livestock in time. I like this question at the end. So, are each party's goals realistic? And this is a process. Anybody familiar with the concept, the finite game compared to the infinite game? Anybody? The book Start With Why talks about it. I would describe our game as an infinite game. Okay? I don't even like to use the word game, but I'll say perspective. There's not a destination with our approach to management. And our bar is higher than our ankle as far as our bar of acceptance is what we want to accomplish in a year. So when we're looking forward, we're looking at how can we maximize the advancement on the resource to be able to be expressed with the productivity of our livestock, and how can we build upon our successes this year, next year, as opposed to how do I get the balance sheet from this year, from January 1 to December 31st, show a profit to be able to do it again next year. Those are two very different perspectives, and I just want to throw that out there as fodder for that. But are the goals, first of all, does the land manager even have goals? It has blown my mind how many times I have met livestock managers and land managers that don't have a goal in mind. Well, to survive another year, that would be a good thing. And that kind of dumbfounds me because I feel we could do so much better as people. So we have to evaluate those goals on each side of the things and have that part of the conversation. I'll give you an example, and there'll be a few pictures to follow. One of our jobs on our federal land application is to restore oak savanna using livestock. That's a real challenge, okay? When you've got hazel, I could not see the people in the back of this room in some of the hazel patches that are there. So until I can find a cow that can completely live on hazel, we're going to be limited on how many acres we can affect of this hazel brush based on how much available forage in the prairies we have. So when we had the initial conversations with some of the folks on the management side of the land base, they're like, well, we want this all to be oak savanna. And I said, well, great, let's identify our limitations. I can't bring in goats because you said I have to use cattle, because the whole project was written for cattle before we were involved. We were picking up from another producers where they left off. So I said, okay, the refuge is 30,000 acres. Roughly a third of that is not swamp or cattail sloughs and that type of thing. I said, I'm pretty sure we could tackle 10 acres this year, and we'll reevaluate and we'll look at it again next year. And that's what we did. But nobody had an idea on the land side what was realistic for us to accomplish with our herd of cattle. So those conversations have to be ongoing.
What is hazel?
Hazel nuts.
Oh.
You're familiar with those? It comes into a bush about this high.
Okay.
Yep. And there was my oak savanna restoration project example. So this is the goal on this application. And interesting enough, this is one of the most productive sites on this whole site, on this whole refuge. And it turns out you go back far enough, you can find out some of these areas were old farm sites. And so if you think of it from an ecological and a management perspective, there was a lot of nutrients from the rest of the land base that pooled here outside the bank barn or whatever may have been next to the house. And that actually shows up when we talked about mapping cattle behavior. They'll migrate to these places where some of this pooling of nutrients happened, and the bricks is 9 times out of 10 always higher around the old farm sites. So this is the goal, right? That's the goal. Again, how many acres can we accomplish this on? There's a big difference between maintenance of these sites than there is on establishment. And again, what tools do we have to use? And this is another one I love. How do we measure our success or failures with our management? This is a part of these lease agreements I think we have to have ongoing conversations about. And it's mind-boggling to me sometimes that there aren't good systems in place oftentimes to say whether we're doing a good job or not. Well, yeah, nobody's had any complaints, so I think we'll do it again next year. I think we could do a little better than that. Is the vision realistic? And I would say that's on both sides. From a cattle performance perspective, if you're looking to attain a new piece of ground for leasing, and also on the land resource side. This is what we were working with. Now, if these cattle were to migrate to the left, you wouldn't see hardly any of them. You can see, I have a pointer here, right? You can see one little guy in there. But, so they wanted this to look, like this. And, we talked with the sheep. It's not a one and done. I only have limited time here, but we turned some sites into moonscapes because we had 1.5 million pounds per acre for 6 hours one day on one site. And we pounded the heck out of it, and it is exactly what it needed. A year later, 1 year rest, it looked beautiful. But we can only touch on so many of those sites a day, right? Okay. How many times have producers looked at situations, opportunities, and thought, hey, that's really cheap grass? I've even had these conversations for my own farm. I see a few nods. I appreciate the transparency there. Is it cheap grass? Has anybody taken the time the year previous to evaluate the grass to see if it's any good of quality or not? Uh-oh. Ha. Whew. All right. Evaluate the forage production the year prior if you can. Now, are you going to have the same conditions when you evaluate those grasses the next year if you get the lease? Not necessarily. We had D4 drought long enough that we couldn't even get sap out of a plant to do an evaluation. It just wasn't possible. But whenever possible, take the opportunity to go out and evaluate what you're looking at. So, it's one thing to look across the field, whether it's driving by in the pickup or it's even getting the neighbor's opinion sometimes. Oh man, I haven't been over to that area. What does it look like? Well, I can tell from the windshield, it looks better than last year, but boy, maybe it's not so good. I would encourage everybody to walk across the piece of property. Don't look out, look down. Okay, it's going to make a big difference on that perspective. Consider taking those bricks readings. I'll admit, for a number of years before I learned how to manage land better than I did 20 years ago, we had a lot of bricks of 3 to 5 on our farm. It was embarrassing. I did a lot of foliar feeding, it improved it, but it wasn't fixing the problem, it was just covering a symptom. Now, last year we didn't take any bricks less than 16, and we had bricks as high as 28. That grows beef. That grows a greyhound and makes it look like some of the pictures you had there. And you know what? It's really, really fun. It's really, really enjoyable to have healthy livestock thriving, jumping around, doing their thing. Not necessarily a deliberate efforts that you're doing, but it's almost passive management. How long has it been since the last grazing event? If you're looking to take over a new lease, how long has it been? Was it overgrazed last year? Was it set stock grazed last year? Was the stocking rate acceptable, appropriate for the conditions you had? All those evaluations should be taking place when you're looking at the piece of ground. Again, maybe there's an opportunity to gain a new lease due to poor management historically. The other challenge is that it's a social issue, and if that's your neighbor that you've grown up next to for years, you'll have to be able to have those conversations when you run across them too. All right, what does this mean for the party grazing? Again, I feel if you take care of the resource, you'll get rewarded if you manage well. Here's another thing, selecting the correct class of cattle to manage for improved forage quality. I'm just going to tell you my approach. I'm not going to say it's what has to happen everywhere, but it's worked really well for me. Whenever I go on a new piece of property, anytime I go on a new piece of property, I take my own animals first. If there's going to be a loss suffered, it's going to be my loss, and it's not going to be transferred to my partners that I custom graze for. And what that's meant is that I have a pretty darn bulletproof herd of cows right now. And they have to darn near winter on a rock pile. We push them every year, and they naturally select themselves. I don't have to work real hard on which ones that I'm going to cull. They usually show up on their own. But that's how I approach things with a colored group of cattle. I didn't take those Holsteins out there the first year and expected them to gain our arranged expectation on gain with a cattle owner. I took my animals at least for 1 year, if not 2 years, on every piece of ground, and sometimes we hit that piece of ground really, really hard. There are some places we had to hit it, so I keep coming back to the hazel brush and this type of thing. Buckthorn, you can't get a polywire through any of it. So that meant we brought in a large group of cattle on a 40, for us. It's our context, we're not dealing with the landmass from here west. But we hit it hard, and some of the local DNR folks drove by and they're like, oh my gosh, look what they did to this place. And lucky enough for one guy that grew up on a farm, he said, they really hit it hard. But he said, what's more important now is what's going to happen from today. Are they coming back in the spring right away? Are they coming back in July? Are they even coming back next year with cattle? Or are they going to let it rebound and restore and recover? So again, it sometimes takes a lot to turn the tide, but that's how we've approached it. It's worked very well for us. We have a group of cattle I'm pretty happy with right now. And I'm always looking at pushing it a little bit further. This is the first year we shipped our cattle south for the winter. We had an opportunity on a pasture in Missouri, and this will be the first year I'm probably not going to feed a bale of hay. So it's kind of cool. Ultimately, I would have loved to have split the herd, kept half home and compared, but I didn't get to that part. I like to talk a little bit about this. Don't confuse disruption with degradation. That description I just talked about, we hit places hard sometimes so we can manage them the way we want the next time over. Disruption is very different than degradation. This is how we push to advance the systems on our pastures. We want planned, purposeful disruption, and we pulse that impact. It's not going to be the same every time. There are some times that we're going to go through, you're going to hardly tell we had cattle there a week later because we're just asking them to take the tips off. There are other times that we want, under these Oak Savanna restoration sites, I want a moonscape. I mean, I want it knocked to the dirt. I want it reset. And so for the particular reason and purpose and goal that you have in mind, you have to manage for. You want to manage for what you want. Acute versus chronic disruption. So that chronic thing, I'll apologize if you're a set stock grazer, but that's chronic disruption. That cow's going to go back to that favorite grass every time. She's going to clip it until it's not there or it's going to get encroached out by something else. We don't do the chronic disruption thing unless that's the only tool that we have, but then we get the heck off and we let things rebound because nature will align itself if you allow it. So acute disruption is what we're after. So each party in a lease agreement should identify their goals and make a plan with contingencies to achieve these goals. Man, we have to have a plan B? Anybody that has livestock knows they have to have a plan B, right? Communicate. You can't overstate the need for communicate. So here's another thing. I'll admit to you, I don't have written leases with everybody that I work with. I have some handshake agreements, and it's worked fine. For me, you got to be a pretty good judge of character, and I've usually given people the benefit of the doubt unless proven wrong. Have I been proven wrong on other business arrangements? Yep, I have been. Sometimes reputations come true, but I do like to give people the benefit of the doubt when possible. This is kind of our motto. Under promise and over deliver. And this is part of that communication thing. When you can come into a situation where somebody has a certain, realization or perspective going forward and what it's going to look like after you pull the cattle off, try to leave it even better. I mean, if you want to provide more opportunity and build a resource that's going to reward you with good cattle performance, this has worked out well for us. We approach each opportunity with the mindset of not what we can get, but what we can achieve with good management. We're looking to serve the process, not suppress. So this is our outcome, a resilient forage supply. High Brix forage. Again, I talked about the Brix levels there. If you're not familiar with a refractometer, I would highly suggest you look into it. It's something you can easily put in the side-by-side or the saddlebag or whatever you're going to take, and if you have a break in the action, you can evaluate things. And you can look at what cattle are eating that day and compare it against what you thought they might have been eating had you predicted, right? What do I do in a flood? This is really funny because we had 21 was D4 drought for us. Everybody thinks Minnesota, a land of 10,000 lakes. 2 years ago, we had 8 inches of rain for the growing season. And yet, we still had flooding in our river bottom land. We had flooding in other areas, clean tilled fields around, and I'm thinking, what the heck? Wouldn't guys want to keep more of their moisture? So you have to have a plan. So when you're looking at a lease agreement, you got to look at your options. Am I paying for acres, or am I paying for the ability to support cattle? Those are the two categories I typically put things in. We do both. We have some applications that we only pay if the cattle graze on that acre for that AU, and that can work out pretty well, as long as you have a contingency plan that you can go somewhere else if you can't be there. This is an example. Now that water did go down, but that affected the return on that land, well, even last year, because this happened last year as well on this ground. This is on the home farm. It typically happens every so many years, but it didn't usually happen when we're in drought conditions, the growing season, but we're still having it. And it might be in season that you gotta put them someplace and throw a bale of hay in front of them until you can get your next plan in place. But I will say, I would encourage you to be nimble to the point where you can put livestock where they need to be that day, not where you think they'll probably be that day. And I'll give you an example. When we started losing our rains in May 4 years ago, we had land that we didn't anticipate going to until August. And we found out in May that we should have been there. And we weren't ready. We weren't nimble enough. We didn't have enough panels. We didn't have the ability to move those corrals to where we needed to for load out. A little more about context. We're spread over about 10 miles here with the home farm. We just figured it out 2 days ago. Every 3 days we had a major event on the farm as far as a major cattle drive, whether that's over a 4-lane highway or trucking cattle 5 miles to the next pasture. Every 3 days. It wasn't every 3 days spread out, but that's our context of the home farm. And so it's kind of a lot to navigate, especially since I'm only home half the time. But we need to have the ability to put the animals where they should be based on the conditions. And we're not going to always be able to predict those conditions. Again, flooding during a drought. Yeah, 8 inches of water, and yet we still had flooding because we can't infiltrate in the landscape. That kind of bothers me. So what about drought? Something that has to give. If conditions developing aren't conditions planned. What are we going to do? Are we going to destock? Do we have a plan to take our cattle? Are they our cattle? Are we custom grazing for someone else? Everybody we custom graze for knows that we are not going to go beyond the limitations of the resource. We're not going to turn it into a feed yard, and there has to be something's going to give. I'm not going to degrade the resource. That's understood with everybody we work with. So whether I have to supplement feed someplace or that they have to take the animals back, they know we have limitations. And that's clearly communicated in all our arrangements. Add acres. One of our federal situations was they recognized the conditions that there is no way we could have anticipated. I mean, average rainfall up until we brought the cattle in 21, my goodness gracious. We unloaded the first load of cattle at 6 in the morning and it was 26 degrees. 1 week later, the high was 106 and it lasted for 10 days straight. There's no way anybody predicted that, but they added acres to our lease. They recognized our needs. They also recognized that we were delivering what we said we would deliver with our management, and they said, we want you to impact more acres. And they did. Okay, supplemental feeding, if an option. Can you even feed on the land that you're grazing on? We have a lot of federal land. It's not a consideration at all. We're lucky enough to have some privately owned land right next to some of our public land applications, so we could take the animals on ours and bale graze, for example. And we have done that at times. But it's not an option everywhere, and you have to identify that going in. Clipping real quick. Does the landowner expect mechanical clipping to be done? This is more on the private side for us. How often, for what purpose? Do they want it looking like a golf course behind them when you're done at the end of the year? I guess this is one that we're at right now. Be prepared to walk away if needed, or maybe walking away is best for now. We didn't take animals to one application last year because of conditions before. And we made the collective decision not to bring animals back in 24. So again, until conditions occur, that might be rainfall. We got caught with a burn one year. They burned in the spring, just so happened to quit raining right after they burned it. You could have watched a mole run across 80 acres. No forage for livestock. Consider generational transition on leases. This happens both on the public land side for us and on the private land. Sometimes it's better and sometimes it's worse from one generation to the next. Just a little more about that. This is one example. We got called by a landowner, and thank you. And the landowner said, well, the land's been in CRP for 35 years, and well, we eat organic, and we think it should be farmed organic. It wasn't a farm to be tilled. It was one of these, right? And I said, I won't work it. I said, I'll graze it. We found out the limitations there based on where it's located. Property taxes are almost $50 an acre a year. I don't know that I can support that farm with grazing because, of course, they want a profit on top, and they should. Same thing with DNR and WMAs. It took the retirement of the old guard for us to be able to, it took us 6 years. We had conversations for 6 years before we got our first group of cattle on land right next to us that needed grazing in the worst way. We started with 140. Last year we were at 120. This next year we're looking at maybe taking that over 3 times for acreage. And that's just come to us because of the way we approach things. Again, 6 years before the first opportunity. This is a personal thing. Okay, this is one of these conversations you have in the mirror. Consider your risk tolerance. So I consider it part personality and part age. I admit, I had way more risk tolerance when I was 25 years old than I do now. I won't risk like I did before. I think I'm more prudent now too, but at the same time, I don't have to. I have a wall of belief built by the demonstration of what I feel I can accomplish with my management, and those are the parameters I work within. But consider this when you're looking at opportunities with leases, is why I put it in. And whatever it is, be honest with yourself. I think it's important to be honest with yourself. And the day I realized that my limiting factor on the farm was found in the bathroom mirror, I was much better off with the conversations with our team and how to accomplish our goals and provide a lifestyle that we were looking for. Don't be afraid to pursue your goals. Again, supported with your why. Our first and not primary goal for anything we do on our farm is to generate income. That has to come as a result of everything else we're doing, of our efforts. I'd like to suggest if you're not a little uncomfortable, you might not be trying hard enough. And that maybe is more along the lines of change. Okay, whatever you can do as far as change for the right reasons, it shouldn't keep you from sleeping at night. Just planning and developing, I know I'm running short on time, develop a multiple year plan, even if it's not, even if you don't have the ability to go multiple years on a lease. There's some that I'll only go year for year because I don't know how long it's going to take me to get it to where I want it to be on a piece of ground. Review the leases and gain access to review other leases. Other cattlemen that you know, man, ask them to look at them, review them, read them. Ask them what they like about them, what they don't like about them, and do your homework. Avoid putting all your eggs in one basket. And again, the reality of public land leases, they could end at any time with whatever change in legislation that there happens to occur. Conduct your business. This should be probably, shouldn't have to even be spelled out, but I put this professionally, use your frontal lobe. Does everybody know what I mean there? The emotional lobes are here. This is the critical thought process, right? That's where it comes from. Use that frontal lobe. There's something to be learned from every agreement relationship, whether you consider it good or bad. Keep the cowboying on the range. Conduct yourself appropriately when you sit down and have your conversations, and take notes. How many of us have these things in our pocket that hold, I don't know how much information? Take pictures, take videos, communicate with your landowners, communicate with, if you're a custom grazer, send pictures, send videos, let them know what's going on. Let them know what you like, what your challenges are. Communication is priceless when it comes to those situations. And develop your skills in advance. Do you have the right to practice? Are you going to go out and do this on a situation where you're developing a new relationship with a landowner and you're going to say, well, we'll see how it goes? Again, effectively demonstrate positive animal and land stewardship, and opportunity will present itself. We grew 6-fold in 2 years on our home farm. And we have opportunities every year. Almost every 6 months, somebody calls us and says, we like what you're doing, would you consider running our farm? Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is, let's have a conversation to see what the possibilities are. But keep in mind too, I'm not pursuing these from a financial advancement perspective. But take time to do things well, and I believe patience is a virtue for a reason. And just a little look at the home farm as we concluded. That's what I got.
We do have a break built in here, so if there's any questions, we can take them.
Sounds good. Yeah.
What are you using for your water there?
Oh, that's one of my favorites. So that is an old floater rig, right? Like a Terragator type thing.
Okay.
And I found an old fire truck tank, and I put it in the back. So I can service 300 head, maybe a little bit more, with a 100-gallon stock tank and a 2-inch hose just gravity feeding out of that. So we have poor water quality in our wells and low volume. So we do have to dip out of other ponds and rivers and that type of thing to fill that. But for the most part, one load of those, a load of that a day services our water needs for that group. And you know what's funny is I have less invested in that than I do in the side-by-side replacement engine for my Ranger. Yeah, another one, Jason.
When you take bricks, are you seeing differences between time of day, temperature, cloud cover?
Yeah, we do. So we're always selecting in the afternoon because we're always going to peak in the afternoon. So noon to 3, we'll hit it. We'll take into consideration cloud cover. We're looking for trends though. So we're not going to get all excited if it's a 5-point drop from one day to the next and we have cloudy conditions that way. So looking at trends, but being consistent not only with the time of day that you sample, but even the person sampling it. You want to control as many variables as you can.
Are you using a garlic presser?
I am, yeah. Oh, here, for any of you guys that are going to ever borrow your wife's garlic press, here's the secret. It's in the pulsing action, okay, of getting the juice out. It's not the brute strength. I don't know how many I have gone through, especially when trying to teach that to other people. They're like, oh, you know, the big guys, I'll get it in the first one, snap. Yeah, so anyway, little tidbit. Yeah.
Do you have kind of a standard of how many pounds per acre that you like to, on a day-to-day kind of, I realize it changes, but.
Yep. I guess there's a maintenance thing. Every year is different. There's not a standard. We'll probably go as low as 50,000, but we've been up $1.75 million for select sites. That's one of the reasons I love that water rig. Wherever I want an impact site, first of all, I don't have bare soil anywhere from one year to the next because I'm always moving the impact site for the water. But then if I have a thistle patch here, they might not like me that day, but they're going to have to go through a thistle patch to get to the water that day. And it's going to be flat when they're done. And I'm not concerned about anything that grows in that field because whatever I'm not going to put through the animal, I'm going to stomp the heck out of underneath them. They are a tremendous tool. And that's why I love livestock numbers that we have now in our operation compared to what if I had to think about buying everything that I needed to reach my ecological goals. So this was the first year out of 8 that we had to do a little mowing because we had some pretty significant rainfall in the spring followed by dry conditions, and I had thistle patches we had to knock down because I couldn't be everywhere at the right time with the herd. Yeah. Yeah.
Does the state or the feds give you any type of a break since you're doing such a like aggressive management like this? Like it's just not like your typical grazing. So like yeah, like it almost seemed like you're doing them a big favor.
I'll say that I've been told many times we should be getting paid for what we're paying for. I think what spoke volumes for us in 21 is they provided so many more additional acres. And yes, we were paying by the AUM, but they didn't have to do that. So aside from that, we're a part of some of the conversations as far as what we can do to eliminate some chemical application, for example. We've been willing to go and target areas and do higher stock density to alleviate some of that. Unfortunately, a lot of the response that we get sometimes is we don't have the staff to support being able to do all that, even though it would save them money and you know reduce the chemical applications. But I don't know, that's where we're at. It's provided so many opportunities, and I guess I really enjoy, I mean, half of what I do now, my family runs 3,500 acres. My wife and my 4 boys at home yet, and most of them are part-time doing some other things too. We can do that. We can do it pretty well. And so, you know, as far as like ranching like the 12-year-old, I can appreciate that because we're setting things up from that perspective. But we're looking at it. One of our goals is landscape change. And we want to demonstrate that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how we approach it. Yeah. Yes, sir.
How do you're talking about the pictures with the hazel and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
How do you fence out an area to keep them confined when you can't get a fence in there? You go through and brush hog it? Or,
Yep, good question. Yep, so we try to do as much as possible, get a forestry in it the winter before and brush some lanes. And that's why we had targeted the 10 acres out of the 30,000. That's what we could get them to get the forestry in there to blaze trails.
Okay.
And but outside of that, yeah, you're limited. So there might be an area that will overstock and overgraze for a period just so the next time we come back we can navigate the wire through some of those areas. But our limiting factor is quite honestly our forage production in the grasslands to impact the wooded areas. Yeah. Yep.
how often do you have to come back to those brushy areas to try to get it to actually start to go down?
So we'd come back every year. So we're at about a 12 to 14 month rest period at that application. And yeah, we try to hit it. So when they first come off the yards or come on the pastures, they have a high tolerance for some of the tannins. I'm sure they've got some parasite loads and that type of thing they're trying to flush out. So we try to target those times as much as possible. But we also try to vary when we hit that piece throughout the season. And we're limited from whenever we can get cattle there, and we're supposed to be off by September 1st because that's when some of these areas are open to the public, which is a whole new realm, right? Thanks for joining us, guys.